This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. So, Jim, let's talk a little bit about the other news and notes here, because there's so many moving parts here with Bill Watts. This is really going to be the basis of our show before we get to the show. Watts held a meeting on June 1st before the TV tapings under his auspices, and added some new directives. He's going to cut back on the length of TV tapings because he believes it burns out the fans and hurts the return gates in those cities. So the days of 25 match TV tapings are done. And what will be almost surely the most controversial new directive, Watts has banned everything off the top rope. The theory behind the rule is that it enables the heels to get great heat, a la Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel in the early 1970s in the AWA, when they got incredible heat when Stevens would illegally come off the top rope behind the referee's back to lead the pinning baby faces.
There you go.
Yes, the idea is to cast Bobby Eaton in the Ray Stevens role on the heel side. However, in this day and age, with fans accustomed to moves of that variety, and with wrestlers like Ricky Steamboat and Brian Pillman, not to mention Jushin Liger and Great Muta, eliminating all moves from the top rope is attempting to retrogress the in-ring product itself and take away what has probably been the single most universally accepted change worldwide of the past decade, which is the advent of the new hot acrobatic moves like moonsaults, Alabama jams, shooting stars, air Pillmans, and the like. Now, this is still something people talk about to this day, but as we laid it out, you gave it the attaboy. Yeah, clearly this is a storytelling device. It's something for the heels to use and get away with something and steal something. But could you also see how a guy like Brian Pillman or Jushin Liger would think, what am I going to do? That's half of my repertoire now.
You got to do it when the referee's not looking. That's
Yeah.
all I can tell you. It's not it's not easy. But hell, the business isn't easy.
That's right.
So, I think, to me, it made sense. But I also understand a Pillman or a Liger or somebody in a situation like you outlined, having concerns, and I could get that. But it's just a matter of adapting your game plan a little bit, and then creating scenarios where the referee was either out of position or incapacitated, and you got your big move in, so they got to see it. So that was kind of the theory behind it. But again, it was a cultural shock for a lot of talents because, like you said, they relied and depended upon some of these high-flying moves to get their matches over.
Watts also banned the juice, as in blood, telling the boys the subject had become too controversial. Watts also addressed the subject of steroids and said he would have to find out what TBS's policy is regarding steroids. He said if TBS doesn't want the guys on steroids, then nobody's going to be on steroids, because if they are, they won't wrestle for WCW, and it's as simple as that. So there's lots of hurdles, lots of hot button issues. As a reminder, 1991 is where the world first learned from Magic Johnson about HIV. I know it existed before that, but it wasn't a mainstream topic before that. And now blood is all of a sudden a hot button issue. And that feels like a major departure from the way things used to be, where it feels like everything else that Bill has implemented is based on, hey, this is the way it used to be. Blood was a staple and now it's not. But his hands are kind of tied in that regard, just based on this political climate and what have you, right?
Yeah, Turner they were not advocates of blood. They wanted a more family-friendly product and not a lot of heavy juice. So it kind of went along with the company philosophy. And like you said, we're still going through a scenario where we're learning more about contaminated blood and things of that nature. The scientific world kept evolving. Things kept changing. New information became available. So, but the blood thing we might have got a little pushback from some of the guys, but not many. And it just made sense, I think, to legislate the blood situation so that, you were talking about getting a lot of juice and being around people at ringside. That's just, you don't want to do that, Conrad. I mean, hell,
Right.
That's stupid.
Right.
So that's kind of how I saw that situation. And I think going forward, it seemed to me like, I might be wrong about this, there might have been a situation where we've got some juice, but it was so unique at that point in time, it actually meant something. I can't remember. I thought there was a situation here or there where Cowboy relaxed that for one match to finish telling a story. I might be wrong on that deal, but the juice was a forgotten memory by and large. And he just had to be more creative and come up with something else that did not include blood to help get your heat.
Do you think Bill knew what he was getting himself into?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think I think he thought he knew. I think he wanted to do well, but I don't think he was prepared for the societal changes within the locker room and wrestling in general. I don't think he was prepared for that. And how could he have been prepared for it? He's living in Bixby, Oklahoma, for God's sakes. He wasn't even watching wrestling.
Right.
So,
to your point, at that point, I think he'd been out of the business for almost 5 years, and, wrestling moves pretty fast. I mean, just look how different the business is now to where it was 5 years ago. In 2017, there was no All In, there was no AEW. Bruce Pritchard's just doing a podcast. Things are a lot different.
Yeah.
Do you think at this point, and again, hindsight being what it is, do you think the business had maybe passed Bill by? It had evolved and he was at a disadvantage, or was it just the political climate that meant he couldn't really succeed?
I think it kind of passed him by. And when he saw how hard it was to push a great big rock up a hill, he lost a little bit of his enthusiasm. It just got to be another day, another problem, another issue. And, that's when it all came to a head. He just got in it. When he worked for McMahon, he just got in his rental car and drove home. I didn't know where the car was. And he's driving home from Connecticut to Oklahoma. That's just cowboy. He's a little impulsive in that regard. But he's used to being the boss, and he's the alpha male, the big elephant in the room, blah, blah, blah. So the cowboy he was unique in that regard. Very unique. So, and some guys never got used to it. You hear guys, I did something the other day with Michael Hayes, a little tape thing for A&E, and Michael and myself and Jake Roberts and Teddy DiBiase, and everybody had stories of the cowboy, and they weren't all hearts and flowers stories.
Right.
Hayes still thinks he got screwed in his payoff at the Superdome and 40 years ago. So he's happy to tell that story. So, it was a tough time I had less fun in 1992 when Cowboy arrived than I had at any other time prior to that or after. It just was a cluster, and always people upset, and I don't know. It just was not a fun place to work at that point in time.
Well, let's talk about what happens here on the episode that airs on June 13th. It's taped on the 1st, and Watts is going to help host Saturday night and say this is the beginning of a new era for WCW, the real deal. He calls the WWF a cartoon, and he says the WCW won't have people throwing up on each other or being electrocuted. Of course, this is referencing the Ultimate Warrior's vomiting angle because of Papa Shango. And then, of course, the silliness with the electrocution at Halloween Havoc with Abdul the Butcher in 1991. He also says the padding on the floor will be eliminated. And Watts says something to the effect that real wrestlers don't need a bunch of mattresses to fall onto. Quote, if that is Watts' legit reason for removing the padding on the floor, then it doesn't seem justifiable and does seem to be behind the times. However, there's some dispute among the wrestlers as to whether or not the padding serves its designed purpose, which is lessening injuries from bumps to the floor. Certainly, it lessens the hip and back injuries from bumps because the mats have more padding. However, some have argued it creates knee and ankle injuries when guys jump off the ropes or the apron because their feet aren't landing on a solid foundation. Did you ever hear that? I mean, I have heard that before. That the guy would tweak a knee or an ankle or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. The thicker the mats, the more danger you're in.
Yeah.
The thin mats didn't offer as much protection, but they did also have the health issues, shall we say, of knees and ankles and other joints. So yeah, it was. I've heard guys talk about that. So it comes down to a deal where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden it's that way every day. Something every day. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, and that gets old.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.